All right, so in this video, we're gonna take a look at modeling another one of the tire treads that we have on the sheet. Originally, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this, but I thought, hey, why not? Let's just do a bonus video where we cover doing a little bit more of a complex one, which is gonna be this right-hand side here. And it's just more learning material for you to see how we can very quickly tackle building new iterations of tires using the same exact system that we had developed for the original tire. So it's going to make the whole process pretty quick. And I'm not going to take as much time explaining what I'm doing because we've already built that entire pipeline for ourselves. As well, I recorded this video at the end of the course. So if you see that render collection in our property outliner there, don't worry, we didn't cover that yet. That's something we'll look at towards the end of this project. So let's go and hide our low poly. I'm going to quickly create a new collection here and call it bonus. And in the bonus folder, I'm going to create a new plane mesh. Now with this plane mesh, I'm going to have that selected, and I'm going to also shift select the high poly version of the tire that we've already made. And pressing Control and L, I'm going to copy all of the modifiers from this current high poly onto this plane mesh. So when I select that, we're going to see it's going to do some crazy stuff. But again, like we've seen, using our tread sheet here, we're going to be able to use these modifiers to model out a new and cool tire tread. So let's go and hide that. And with our plane here, I'm going to rotate it on the x-axis, 90 degrees. And I'm just going to quickly hide a couple of these here. So actually, I'm just going to hide all the modifiers and move our template here, or our guide, over just a little bit so that now it's going to be the appropriate tire tread. So with this one, it's a little tougher to tell where we want to actually create just the initial pattern and use the modifiers to expand on the rest of that, right? Where our tire tread back here, if we take a look, it was very easy to see this pattern here. And we just had to create one of these and allow the modifiers to repeat the process for us. Here, we have an issue of a kind of alternating pattern as we go up and back and forth. So the pattern isn't immediately visible. If I grab my handy dandy annotate tool, the pattern here as I see it is going to be somewhat of a downwards arrow where we have a bit of a dip in the center, and then it's going to come up on both sides. And again, we're going to have some kind of like empty space here as we go across, right? Where the pattern alternates across on the other side and we don't have anything. So we still need to account for that when we're modeling. So I'm going to take the top here and bring this down. Actually, you know what? I'll bring it up that way so that we're hitting the top of the left side. And then I'm going to take the bottom up so that we're going to, actually, I'll maybe bring that halfway down. We're probably going to adjust that in a minute here, but to start us off, I think that's going to be fine. I'm going to add a cut down the center, and I'm just going to Control B to bevel that cut so we get some space for those kind of inner blocks. So now let's go and bring up our sides to match kind of the bottom of the right-hand side here. And I'm going to bring our center down to kind of somewhere in the middle. Again, right, this is going to be along the center in between those two because this one is also in the center. We're going to want those to match up. Now, it's probably not going to be perfect, and we're going to need to do a little bit of manual work later on, but I think that's going to be a good start. So now let's add a cut down the center here. And then I'm going to add a cut on both the top and the bottom. So we have these edge loops running horizontally, kind of like along that arrow shape. And I'm going to hit Control B to bevel those to create really what the shape bounds is going to be for both of these here. And it might not make us a lot of sense right now, but we're going to see what that's going to look like here in a second. So now I can go and actually get rid of this center edge loop if I just dissolve that there. And now going into face select mode, I'm going to select, oops, not that one there, select these two and these two, right? The areas that we want to extrude. And I'm just going to extrude those out. Now, again, the distance doesn't really matter right now. That's something we're going to be able to fine tune, but that's going to be a good start. So let's just take a look and see what this looks like with our subdiv on and our array. And actually, I'll turn the subdiv off, turn the array on. And we can see that's pretty intense, right? It's using the same array distance as our previous tire did. And we're going to get a lot of overlapping faces. So let's start to bring this up a little bit. There we go. And I want to now just take a look at some of that snapping in between each version of our array. So it looks like we're going to get some good snapping there in the center, but we still have some gaps in between our arrays on the side. So coming back into edit mode, I think what I'm going to do is take both of these here and just bring that down a little bit, and then take these top two as well and try and meet it kind of halfway. So we get something like that, which looks pretty good. Let's see, how does this look with the curve? It looks okay. And again, it's not looking too, crazy cool right now, but with some iteration, I think we're going to be able to get to that point. Now, actually looking at the array again, what I think I might want to do is I'm going to get rid of this bottom loop and just use this top one here to connect to the rest of our array. That way we're not going to have just a, pretty tight conjunction of vertices really pinching in those crevices there. So this is going to be a lot smoother. Okay, so the next thing I want to take a look at is going to be our lattice modifier, because right now we're still using the original lattice that we did for the low poly, and that might work for this particular tread, or it might work, to share a lattice for a couple of different treads. But chances are with different tire treads, they're going to have a bit of a different curved profile. So I'm going to go find that lattice. I'm going to copy it and paste it, and I'll call it lat tractor, so we know it's a lattice for the tractor tread. And with this selected, let's go and reselect our new lattice. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and just select the edges here. Again, I'm holding control and clicking to do a selection of those edges there. And again, I'll do the same thing over here. Oops, selecting the wrong one. And let's just extrude those back to create the sides of our tire here. And now if we turn our curve back on and our subdivision surface, actually I'm going to turn the subdivision surface off just to get see what the first issue we're running into is that we'll notice with the lattice modifier, right, we're getting that curvature, which is nice. But because of such low resolution of our initial model, it's going to kind of create these weird artifacting issues where we have our quad kind of bending at such a weird angle that it's going to give us some of the shading issue. And it's also just not going to conform nicely to the lattice that we've created. So what we'll have to do is in edit mode, and I'll make sure to leave this on so we can see what's going on, is I want to go, actually I'll just show it to you here, is we're going to want to add some resolution to these faces here, because right now they're just very flat and long faces. So I'm going to add about 3 loop cuts to this, and actually I'll go overhead so we can see what's going on here. If I add 3 to this, you can see what's happened now is I've provided it with more resolution, so it's going to get a much nicer bend to fit that profile. So again, we'll add 3 cuts to our resolution there, and that's going to look a lot nicer. So now when we take a look at the tire, right, it's going to be just way better, leaps and bounds ahead of what we had originally, because we now have the proper resolution. So that's going to be a kind of subtle gotcha when working with this, because once we turn on the subdivision surface, right, you're not going to really notice too much because it's going to smooth things out. But we want to make sure originally the underlying geometry is also fitting the profile. And we're just using the subdivision surface modifier to kind of help smooth out and give more resolution to a pretty solid base. Sweet. So let's get to beveling. I'm going to turn our bevel modifier back on. And we're going to come back into our geometry here. And we're going to do pretty much the same that we did for our original tread. We're just going to go around and find areas that we want to kind of sharpen up to bring back some solid form to our geometry. I'm going to turn our subdivision surface off, and actually I'm going to turn our lattice off as well. So I'm going to select these up top here and these as well, and make sure we don't forget about the sides. And if you remember, we hit N on our keyboard to come into item and mean bevel weight. So I can turn those up, and that's going to get us a nice bevel. Now it's pretty subtle, actually. It's a very, very small bevel, but it's there. And if we turn on our subdivision surface modifier, again, we can see the sharpness of that, right? That's having a pretty drastic effect. I'm also going to go along the outline of our perimeter, sharpen that up, right? That's already done wonders to the profile of our tire. And we'll do the same thing over here, grabbing all these sides and bevel that up. So let's take a look on our model here. That's looking pretty good, although we are getting a bit of an issue here, it looks like. Let's take a look and see what's going on. I turn on the array. See if I bring these down. There we go. I think we just had them up a little bit too high. Oh, no, actually that doesn't seem to be what's going on. Here, let me take a look off camera and I'll get back to you with what's going on. Okay, that was a little weird. I couldn't figure it out, but I went ahead and just moved them up on the Z-axis just slightly. And actually, I'll go and move these back ones too, just to make sure we're moving everything up uniformly. And that seemed to fix it for both sides. So if you're having that issue, problem solved. A little bit weird, but I guess we didn't have it up as much as it needed it to be. So now that we've got our bevels out of the way, let's go and just add a little bit of, intrigue and visual interest into these side profiles as well. So I'm going to make sure I select both sides here and do these equally so that we're getting, even interest on both sides of our tire. And I'll scale these out. Maybe turn the curve back on so I can see what's going on here. And these are going to be really big, thick tires. So I'm going to make sure that they're really chunky. Kind of push those out a little bit. Add some more loop cuts. Scale those out. And I think that's going to be good for now. Again, you can go and really fine tune it as much as you want, but for the sake of the tutorial, I think that's going to be good. Now, something that I didn't show on the other tire tread, which I think is going to be really cool for something like this, or even if you want to go back and do this on your other tread, we can add an interesting ring around our tire, which some tires have, and oftentimes they're filled with different types of useful information about the tire, such as the tire pressure, what type of seasonal tire it is, and stuff like that. So what we can do with that is if I come over to our side profile, and I go and just bevel that and extrude it now inwards. It's going to look a little funky right now, but we have to go and just quickly delete these side faces that we've created. And now we've got an inset into our tire tread here. Now it's maybe a little too sharp. So if I just bring that kind of down like that, And actually, maybe I'll move this whole thing here. Just move it kind of a little bit further along the tire. Something like that. And using our bevel modifier, I can go and just give these a weight. You can see now we're getting a bit of a cut into the tire. So that's another cool thing that you can play around with, is actually adding some interesting details along the sides of the tire as well. And I just wanted to show you that in case you get some ideas starting to formulate in your head. Now I'm just going to Control Z to get rid of all that, because it's going to give me a little bit more issue as I'm working with this, just because it's, something I got to maintain and make sure it looks good. And now looking at this tire, I think I'm actually going to just kind of move these back in along the X a little bit. It felt like it was becoming a little too round on the sides there. And something I'm also noticing is that the treads themselves are looking a little bit too squared. I want to make sure that they taper a little bit as they get closer to the side, and then they get a little bit larger as they work inwards towards the center ring of our tread. So again, something we can do very simply. If I just go and hide our curve, the way I want to do that is I'm just going to select these edges here and gently move them in on the Y. And then I'm going to just slowly start to move in every other one as well. And actually, you know what? I'll get rid of the array so I can go over top. And let's take a look at moving these inward just a little bit to give it that nice soft taper. So it's going to look something kind of like that. Again, where it's tapering towards the sides, but we're still getting those nice big grooves along the center of the tread. Now, something that's also been kind of bothering me a little bit, if we take a look at the wireframe, we'll notice that again, we're getting some of those kind of pinched areas, and that's a result of just how we have our edges running in our model here. So we can see that we're getting some of these pinched areas. So what I'm going to do is just quickly start to merge these right up until the end. We're going to leave a triangle there. And let's repeat this for the other side. And now what I'd like to do is also space these out evenly. So we can use our good friend Loop Tools to do exactly this. So with that selected, you can right click, go up to Loop Tools, and head on down to space. And with all those selected, it's going to provide equal and even space across all of those, which is just going to help us out when removing some of those pinched edges. So I'm going to repeat this process across all of these here. And repeat this for the other side. So that now when we take a look, we're going to get evenly distributed vertices here, except for this little problem area over here, which again is where the first and the last tread is going to meet. So this raises another potential issue as well, is that because of the sizing of this tread that we've created, we might need to go and create another curve to be the guide for this tread. So I'm going to go and select our Bezier circle from our original high poly and paste that into our new one. And again, I'll call this curve tractor as well. And now select our tractor here, find our curve modifier, and let's select the tractor curve. So now with this, I can go and scale this up and better fit, the overlap that we have right here. Now you'll notice that when I do this, it seems to just end, right? It's not updating the curve, the array modifier. And that's because this is still using the Bezier circle from our original high poly. Now in this instance, I think it actually kind of works in our favor, because remember from the previous tread, right, when we went and ran out of array instances, we'll say, it just created a new one, and there was always this kind of overlap between the first and the last. But because we're not actually updating that Bezier circle and instead are doing the new circle we've created, we're actually able to kind of better match up the start and the end here. So I'm going to just slightly scale this in. And actually, let's make sure that our weld modifier is on. Come back to this curve. And this is going to take some fine tuning here. Actually, I'm going to go full screen. All right, and let's just make sure that our weld is maybe something like 0.002. And did that work all the way around? I don't think it did. 0.004. And now it becomes the guessing game of how far are these. Oh, but you'll notice that we ran into some issues here. So again, maybe our weld modifier is not going to be just a catch-all for this. So we might have to do this by hand, which is going to be okay. But just be aware that you might have to do that down the line. And I'm actually noticing I maybe created a bit of an issue for myself with these triangles here. You can see that we're getting some of those kind of like sagging points. What happens if I turn the subdivision surface up? And then shade this smooth. I don't think it looks too bad. But for people who are adventurous, let's take a look anyways. This is kind of unscripted. But I think what the issue is that we're going to need to instead take these up here. And I'm just going to hit G twice to do an edge slide. And just merge those with the top. And again, I have this little merge vertices auto button on. So make sure you have this turned on so that you can just slide vertices into other vertices and it will just merge them automatically. And we'll do that as well. Now let's go ahead and do a space, 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 and repeat the process. All right, so now how are we looking? If I go and shade this flat, still looking kind of goofy there, but I do think it's looking a little bit better. It's looking more consistent. And if you shade it smooth anyways, you're really not going to notice it. So at the end of the day, for the high poly, the topology doesn't really matter as long as your shading looks correct. And right now, it does look like we're getting some pretty good shading with a subdivision surface level of 2. All of our surfaces that we want to be sharper are sharper. And I think that's looking pretty good. So now before we finish this video off, I just wanted to kind of close out with saying that if you're looking at retopologizing something like this, I would recommend taking a bit of a hybrid approach where with the original tread, what we did was just simply capture the silhouette with a very simple, smooth surface. For this particular model, because the grooves are so deep, I'm not sure I would recommend doing that. And instead, I would kind of do that approach that we took with our hubcap, where we duplicated it. We reduced the subdivision surface to, maybe a level of 1, something that still is able to capture the general silhouette. And then I would go in and manually start to remove edges that I feel aren't really essential to the overall silhouette. That way, still capturing most of the important detail. But really, I think the limiting factor for this particular tread piece is that the grooves are just simply too deep for us to capture them with a very smooth top. Again, it's going to come across as very kind of baked down, and you're going to really have a hard time, I think, capturing just that silhouette of those deep grooves.